Good morning. Today is August 21st, 2023, and it is 10:32 a.m. As a quorum of the committee is in attendance, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Central Health Ad Hoc Appointment Committee. As a reminder, some of our committee members may be also participating by video conference, so the staff will be managing video and audio feeds of all participants closely to make sure we have a legally compliant meeting at all times. First item of business is public communication. Members of the public who wish to make comments virtually during the public communication portion of the meeting must have registered with Central Health via the online form or by telephone no later than 9 a.m. today. Brianna, did anyone register to make comments for the Ad Hoc Appointments Committee meeting? Thank you. We'll now proceed to the committee agenda.
Sir,
Yes?
I did not register, but I'd like to know if I could just make a quick statement.
Yes?
Welcome. I'm
Turn it
glad,
on. There you go.
glad to be back. I had been gone, and I didn't realize that some of my own board members didn't realize I was going to be gone for over 2 weeks. But I had personal business to take care of out of state and was not able to be here. I did meet with Monica Crowley and Jonathan on the Tuesday before I left on that night, and expressed to them some of my concerns with items on our agenda, and hope that they have been expressed to you all or incorporated in their presentations. If not, at some point in time, I would like to make sure that you all as board members get a copy of my concerns. And I just wanted to say that it's good to be back in Texas, and thank you all for being here this hot summer day.
Thank you, and we'll discuss any item we need to moving forward. Agenda item 1, approve the minutes of the Ad Hoc Appointments Committee, July 24, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move approval.
Manager Bell, Shannon, thank you. All who approve, any noes, any abstentions? The motion so passes.
Great.
Agenda item number 2, discuss and take appropriate action on criteria for a timeline to be used by the Appointments Committee to solicit, evaluate, and recommend candidates for appointment to outside boards and committees. Chair Bell and I will be presenting on this item. I'd like to open up this area for discussion by beginning that this is simply as a timeline that we're starting with about proceeding with the interview process, et cetera. Where I put my little list. One minute.
Remember, I suggested you lay out both items.
Both at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move to agenda item 3.
Do you want me to explain it?
Yes.
Members, what we're going to do is the chair is going to lay out both items, and then we're just going to have a general discussion. Therefore, we don't have the lawyers telling us that we're not talking about what's in a particular item. Both items will be on the floor, and so it keeps us from sort of having to stop and start all over again. So he's going to lay out both items. We're going to have a discussion. At the end of that discussion, we're going to go back and take a motion on item 2 and item 3. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, we're going to discuss and take appropriate action on steps to be followed by the committee in seeking and evaluating candidates for appointments, including recruitment of candidates, evaluation of applications using consistent criteria for vetting candidates, an interview process and development of questions, procedure for recommending finalists, including sole finalists for consideration by the full board of managers, notification of successful and non-selected candidates. Chair Bell and I will also be presenting on this item. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for discussion by first beginning with what Manager Bell and I discussed in the hope of being somewhat efficient. And that is, first off, the process of receiving a request from a board for reappointment versus appointment. And a request from the board to the committee about outlining what duties, objectives, and expectations for the appointees, as well as what experience, both professional and personal, they're looking for in an appointee. We felt it was important to have input from the boards as to what they particularly need. For example, they need someone with legal experience, medical experience, financial experience, that they emphasize that to us. So do y'all want to discuss that process to start with? Okay. Chairman Valadez, you have a comment?
I really don't have any comments. I think what we tried to do was to outline a more efficient way and a very clear way of getting names and going through a process to be able to evaluate and have the committee interview and then make a recommendation to the board. And, you know, there's some details here that we had discussed earlier. We wanted some idea of at least what the chair felt about the member, but then I think we have sort of backed off from that, and we have another suggestion for the committee, and that is that we interview the person who wants to be reappointed, ask that individual what's changed since they've been appointed for 2 years. Are there any issues that they are sort of aware of that concern them? Have they experienced any time constraints that have kept them from? So in essence, it's not an interview with them, so to speak. It's more of a dialogue with the person to be reappointed and sort of have them outline for you what their experience has been. And then, you know, we can take it from there. I think an interview, this is my personal opinion, is sort of a slap in the face for somebody who has volunteered their time for 2 years. And you're going to come back and say, well, you know, we don't know whether we want to have you again. And it could be that somebody looks at that and says, you know, I'm done with this. So we have some really good appointees, and I think we really need to keep them. And so providing them the respect that they need in sort of going through a reappointment process and validating the fact that we appreciate the fact that they have given up their time and volunteered to provide service to both Central Health and the organization that they're on the board for. So that's my comment.
Thank you. So I'd like to point out that there's two separate issues. One is for reappointment, which is, as Chairman Bell and I discussed, more of an interview process and feedback from them, actually a discussion, and versus a fresh appointment. Okay? Anyone else? Yes, Manager Jones.
I agree with what Chair Bell said. I would just put a caveat also to those on the reappointment, is that one of the things I think we would want to encourage our appointees is that at least on some frequency, I don't know, it's 6 months or quarterly, is to come back at a board meeting and sort of update us on any major initiatives that may be undertaken by the agency to whom we have appointed them to, so that we can have a heads up as opposed to finding it out either in the media or some other format. So I would encourage maybe as part of the reappointment process or even the appointment process is that we ask that our representatives come back on a certain frequency and just give us an update, not a day-to-day detail, but, you know, us, for instance, Integral Care, what new policy initiatives are out there? What new challenges do they face? What funding do we have available that they might want to give us a heads up of something so that we can have an idea that he or she or them are engaged in this effort. So I would just encourage us to consider that as a process.
Thank you. And segueing into that, we could have if you'd like to draw up a list of responsibilities that you'd like to address in someone who is appointed. We have, I was informed this morning, we do have free annual reports that come from, is that correct, Mike? Yeah. And I would, I suppose that if we want more than that, I would think it'd be asking, I personally think it'd be asking a lot versus beyond, say, an annual report from the board to come forth, say, Integral Care to come forth and report to us how things are going versus each appointee.
I'm not saying that I'm asking for them to give a report. I'm just saying on a quarterly basis, maybe just give us any updates that they deem are necessary, heads up, so that we can sort of have a example of something we might be going into, versus asking them to give us an actual report or so. Because an annual report is great. Is that annual report provided in writing by the member, or is it by the agency?
It's both. Well, it depends on the organization, but the organizations typically publish written or annual reports, and then I believe it's towards the end of the calendar year that the board chair and the CEO or the executive director, so for instance, Community Care, Integral Care, of course, we hear from Sendero quite a bit, come in and actually verbally provide a report to the board.
And that's fine annually, but I'm just saying, 365 days, a lot happens in that time frame, and something could be on the horizon that they are seeing that we may not know about. And if we have an appointee, it seems to be advisable that we would ask that person to give us a heads up what they're seeing. Perhaps maybe don't put the time frame quarterly or 6 months, but as they deem necessary or see an item. I think that should be written into the criteria, because we could appoint someone who basically takes the role and just sits there and comes back and not. So I just think that would be something we might want to consider.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Manager.
Thank you. I agree with both what Shannon and Dr. Bell have said, Manager Jones and Dr. Bell have said. But I'm assuming we're referring to this sheet? of-
Yes, that's
of
correct.
Appointments. I have yet to hear from Capital City Innovation, and I was one of the very vocal members of this board when it was created, and when the Board of Managers allotted the first $250,000 to this entity, and we have yet to receive any reports on them, and I'm concerned about that because they are also, there are some of those members, the Capital City Innovation, were created by, and have, if I'm not mistaken, from the original appointments, entity representatives that we actually do business with and that we fund. So it would just be a way for us as a board to know what we are doing, participating in this committee or organization, that we don't need to have reports and we don't need to have updates. Or in the alternative, which is more important to me, what is it that we are doing together to achieve a close in all the disparity gaps and improve the quality of life for those that live under 200% FPL? That, to me, is most important. If there are strategies, if there are entities, there are things that are being created, goals that are being achieved by those entities, then how, in fact, are those helping the population that we were created to serve? And if there are no direct, including indirect, but more importantly, direct impacts on that population and on our mission and an alignment of our mission, then I think we need to have conversations about whether or not we need to continue participating in any way, shape, or form, or improve the communication and participation levels so that we can jointly work on this, especially as we're looking to be more inclusive as an organization and as a vehicle to align all those various entities, be they governmental or not, to what we are trying to accomplish, to our goal, and to the closure of disparities gaps, which is most important, especially in light of the fact that that is the very reason we sought to create an equity plan, to close disparities gaps that historically have existed in our minority and poverty populations and had not been previously addressed or impacted in any significant way since the creation of this organization. I'm very concerned about our appointments to the city and the county, if we have any, like the Regional Affordability Committee. You know, affordability in Travis County and Austin, at least for the city, has been a major impact and a cause of homelessness, of joblessness, and of a decline in the quality of life of our population that we were created to improve their quality of life for. And so I think that it's very important, yes, that we look at these things, but we also look at the overall impact and effect of these entities on our population and whether or not we are working in tandem. Yes, we have our own appointees, our own staff members who sit as representatives of some of these organizations, our own staff members. And yet, as a staff member, I don't see them here talking to us about exactly what we are trying to accomplish and what they have accomplished. Now, Mike, you may know, and other staff members may know, but we ourselves do not, and the public doesn't. And we're a taxing jurisdiction that's supposed to be responsible for how our tax dollars are spent. And if our staff is spending a lot of time doing work with other entities that is not significantly impacting our mission or helping us to achieve the goal of closing disparities gaps and improving the quality of life, then we have an issue that we need to be addressing. And so I'm just going to put that out there.
Thank you, Manager Velez. I think that, I appreciate your comments, and I think we're all in agreement on that. But I think the issues you're describing are really more governance issues related more to the executive committee decisions as to what we will demand of boards versus what we're discussing is appointments to boards.
Well, no.
And I think if we wish to have, say, a criteria that a board should report every 6 months or every year back to Central Health Board of Managers. But I appreciate your concern, but I don't think we're discussing the same thing.
Well, in my opinion, sir, I do believe we are discussing the same thing at two different levels. The individual appointment level, because they are not only our appointments, but they're our staff. And then on a secondary level, and that comes with the the participation in their reporting process to Central Health as a whole. You know, that's another secondary issue. But the primary issue is whether or not our appointees are doing what we expected of them. And for me to see Capital City Innovation here is really something surprising. And I want to make sure that moving forward, that we work in tandem with our designated partners in achieving our goals and aligning our missions, and not appear to us at this late date when Capital City Innovation has at least been in existence for 7 or 8 years.
Right.
So
Martin.
that's all I'm saying. And
At the appropriate time, I address Manager Valdez's remarks.
And, excuse me?
At the appropriate time, I address Manager Valdez's remarks.
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, I do recollect, and it was in the room over here in front of a committee meeting, when Capital City Innovations was a lot more active than what it is today, pre-pandemic. Now, post-pandemic, it is, you know, and again, because we've been working on the demolition and reading of the Brackenridge campus, there's not been a whole lot of activity, but they did, in fact, come in and report on more than one occasion. Now, I think in to what the chair said, there's an upcoming discussion around overall governance and oversight that I think the board's prerogatives, need to be clarified so that going forward we can address some of these issues that you're bringing up. And as far as staff appointments and what they're doing, it really folds up into what the organization as a whole is doing, because no one board member, whether they're central health staff or somebody else, really and truly, they can speak on behalf of their experience as a board member, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to the board chair and the CEO or the executive director of these various organizations to come in and speak for that organization as a whole in terms of what the organization has done, and then it's up to the board to decide it's either aligned with our mission or it's not. But again, and it's also, the board prerogative to hear from all board members, but there's really only one official voice, I think, that, or maybe perhaps statement, if you will, that speaks on behalf of those organizations. So just some things for consideration. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mike, and I tend to agree with you for the most part, but as we look at interviewing and having discussions with those that want to continue to represent us in those capacities, or even the fresh appointee to these entities that are working with us and for us, then I think that my comments are relevant.
Right, and I appreciate that when we're going to get to that point later. But right now, the issue is how do we proceed with appointments versus a reappointment? And we're all on the same idea about the mission, but our job here is the criteria can be, for example, if someone we are particularly looking on a certain board, for example, affordability, is that person going to interview, we certainly have put forward our issues that we wish to have addressed. And that's just part of the interview process.
Yes,
Okay.
I understand, and I appreciate that. Just one last thing, and I do want to say that if that is in fact the case, then as we write the policy or create that process, that we be sure and include those questions of our candidates or of our reappointments, so that they can know that we will not just put them by the wayside, but rather that they will be held in high regard with respect to their representation on those individual organizations or committees that we're working with and trying to create a better quality of life for Travis County residents. Thank you.
We had, the staff had sent out a petition for questions to present to interviewees, and I don't know that, I think just Chairman Bell and I presented questions. No one else that I remember did. Is that correct? So you can certainly, I'd be open to entertaining another list as you were going to present questions you might wish to ask of an interviewer, but I think we need to formalize that process.
I agree.
I think we're
Thank
gonna
you.
limit it to 7 or 8 questions that are focused on the mission of Central Health. Okay? Yes, Chairman Bell.
This will be real quick. In looking at the list, I think our first and foremost concerns should be about our enterprise partners. So as we look at appointments and governance when we have that conversation, it really should pertain to Integral Care, Community Care, and Sendero, okay? Now, I do agree with Manager Valadez that we should have on the agenda at some point an update on the Capital Area Council of Governments, Capital City Innovations, regional affordability, and I don't think there's much to say about the Tobacco Settlement Permanent Trust Fund Administration, but, it's on the list. And we could surely talk about what those presentations might include when we have our governance sort of conversation. I also would like to, when we have our governance conversation, talk about the appropriateness of the appointee. If you're going to be on a committee that requires a lot of operational knowledge about the organization, I don't think it's appropriate for a board member. to be a
I agree.
appointee. Yeah, I'm not saying you did.
Yeah.
And, but I do believe that when it comes to the level of policy, then definitely a board member is the appropriate person. So I also, again, would like to talk about those things in our governance discussion. And that'll be that will, not an ongoing discussion, but it's not gonna be a one-time discussion. We're gonna lay it out initially, sort of get a clear idea of what we wanna discuss about the governance, and then we're gonna come back to the board, or to the committee, the executive committee, and have a more robust discussion about those items that clearly need to be discussed and delineated. So that's, and it was
Thank you.
longer than it should have been.
That's fine. So I would like to open it up to solicit questions for anyone who has not submitted questions for interviewees. Yes.
Well, once again, mine is not a question for the interviewees. I'll just make sure I'm clear on understanding. So we're talking about selecting individuals who are going to represent Central Health on the major ones, to be able to be our representative. Am I understanding you said that then our expectation is not that they will report back on some frequency to the board about what their initiative, what things are going on, separate and apart from the routine organizations coming to us? I just want to make sure I understand that.
Are you talking me?
Well, I mean, to whomever.
I think that's an issue, once again, of governance issues versus our solicitation of appointees and reappointments. For an issue to decide as a governance issue, what Central Health Board of Managers wishes to get back from them. We interview someone to say, we'll expect a response or Q 6 months or every 12 months. That's fine, but I think that's a governance issue versus this committee's job of essentially appointing and reappointing people.
So we should not give them advice. I mean, we should not upfront let them know these are some of the expectations we would have of them.
No, we should.
No, but that, yeah, we, absolutely, but I think that's the issue in terms of our questionnaires and in the interview process, you interview someone. Once again, I think if we wish to formalize a 6-month or 12-month review process, I think that falls personally to the Board of Managers, to a governance issue.
We'll talk about it in the executive committee, is
yeah.
what so in essence, Shannon, what you want to see, and there are other members, not just you, want to see are a list of, quote, responsibilities of our appointees. One of them would be, I would say, a dialogue with the board on a frequency that either we set or ask them to set, depending on the organization. Sendero, you hear from their board all the time because they come here and we talk. Integral Care may not need to be here that often, but let the members sort of tell us how frequently that discussion might want to take place based on what that discussion is going to include, okay? And so, because we have had questions by other members with regard to what does governance look like for us, I want to take that on as a topic. And I feel that part of governance has to do with the people that we appoint to their boards and what we expect from those individuals. So in that discussion, which will happen in executive committee, not here, all right, we're going to get into that and hopefully come up with a list that can be utilized, that can be given to the individual, all right, in saying that the Board of Managers expects these particular responsibilities from an appointee. We give it to them at the initial time that they show interest, so that they have an idea. Does that help?
I'm following what you're saying there. I'm just, then, in hindsight, I'm wondering, then, what is the expectation of us here then?
It's to set up a process to do the interviews, it's to set up a process to vet the people who are interested. It really is more process-oriented than it is governance-oriented.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, and I'd like to emphasize that this is simply, we're trying to have a process set up to appoint and reappoint people here. I think that, and I appreciate your comments, and I think I agree with them fully about, but once again, I think that falls into an executive committee meeting, I think, in terms of governance issues.
Okay, I mean, I'm fine, it just, to me, that if I'd known that, I'd stayed at home and drunk my coffee at home, because this process seems to be somewhat elementary and simplistic.
Well-
And I thought part of the expectation is helping us to ascertain what it is that these individuals that we will be appointing will be expecting, as well as the questions and the process by which they go through.
And we will get to that.
Yeah.
But in essence, the process may seem sort of elementary, but I've been on the board now, and you've been on the board for over 5 years, longer than that, and we haven't had a process of appointing. When I was on the board of Sendero, I sort of had to hunt down folks to say, hey, these terms are expiring. We get them on the board, they put them on the consent agenda. People would be upset about the fact that it was on the consent agenda because nobody had vetted them. Nobody from the board had talked about them. So I respectfully would like to tell you, we haven't had a process, and this is what we're trying to set up here.
Thank you, and that's, my very first meeting here, that we interviewed 3 people, and it was just a very unpleasant experience, and I think that we need to have a process that we can all agree on. We have a set of questions, we have goals that we wish to set up, to thank people for interviewing, and approve people that we all agree upon. But it is simplistic, but the point simply is to simplify it, so we don't have, the situation that occurred in the first meeting I was in.
Okay, I'm fine, we can proceed on, I just want my
Okay,
point
thank you.
noted.
One thing we had discussed was essentially, and this goes to Manager Valadez's point about sort of finding where do we recruit people from, and the idea was sort of create a stable of organizations and people and contacts that would act as a source to appeal for applicants' appointments. Anyone that wishes to suggest different groups that we could access, I'd say that Central Health should know about who you'd suggest.
Well, I think that there are a variety of organizations that work on diversity and inclusion in the community that hopefully Central Health, as part of our equity plan, has been engaged and involved with. So I think as a minimum, we would start with those organizations that we begin to look at. I don't have the whole list. You all have them. So I would first encourage us to start with that group.
Correct, and that was the idea, was sort of generate a standardized list for people that would act as a source. And of course, any personal contacts to suggest to the board as well.
Just make.
Mm-hmm.
We could just make sure that it's not an exclusive membership. We want to make sure that this is open, because what we want to put forth to the public is that this is an organization that is open and welcoming and inviting of people to participate at whatever level they themselves can, but to also know that we have a culture, which is an issue that we have not yet addressed. We have a culture at Central Health and at this board of being open to their advice, to their recommendations, and to their opinions, however diverse they may be. They may not be what we may expect to hear or want to hear, but I'm personally one of those that is an advocate for diverse opinions. I'm not a groupthink kind of person, and I think in order for us to move forward in a more inclusive way, we need to really think about that culture and how it is reflective of what we actually do at Central Health. There are those that don't have lost faith and confidence in Central Health because they think that it's a clique. And I personally think it's only a clique if the public and we ourselves don't do anything to change that perception and be truthful in evaluating what exists so that we can make recommendations, which is, I think this is a great start in looking at what didn't exist before. So this all may have led and contributed to those kinds of opinions and attitudes. And so the more responsive we are to openness, the more inclusive we are to diverse opinions and to diverse populations, representatives, from the top down, I think the better off we will be. So long as we take into consideration and adapt ourselves to what could be construed as being necessary to make sure that everybody is included and everybody feels welcome. And I think that this board, and I think that this Central Health that we have in place right now has come a long way from being such an old member. The only one longer seniority on this board is Dr. Zamora, who came on a year before I did. But I will tell you that there have been great improvements. There's more to be had. I don't know how great they will be, but I do know that it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we are inclusive of those recommendations and of those opinions, and that we do not feel intimidated by thinking that we're just going to discuss them, let's say, at the executive committee level, because at some point in time, I truly believe that the charge that I was given by my appointed body was to be a participant in the decision-making process, not somebody that was ratifying what had already been a decision made by someone else. And one of my biggest concerns has always been that there is not a more inclusive participatory level of managers in the receipt of important information that could help them make a better choice and a more informed decision. And I think that we're going, we've taken great strides in overcoming that little blip in how we operate as an organization. But I think that we can do a little bit better. And hopefully this self-evaluation process of us and what we have or do not have at Central Health is going to be a way that we can accomplish that.
Thank you. Well, what I wanted to make clear was that any board member can certainly approach staff and say, I'd like this organization approached to look for applicants. Any person that staff knows it might be a good applicant to apply as well, but it will be inclusive in that sense that the staff should be open to any recommendation, any organization you might know of that you might recommend, or any staff member might recommend for
Well,
an
to
applicant.
that, in regards of that, we have had mixed signals over my tenure on this board. You don't speak to anybody except for one person. You don't go off, you don't make a phone call to another Central Health staff. You don't do this, you don't do that. Otherwise, you're harassing them, you're taking their time, you're blah, blah, blah. Now, oh, well, go ahead and let staff know and blah, blah, blah. No, I think that what is appropriate is when we funnel information to the designated persons, staff persons, because Mike is our CEO and he is the only staff person that we have any ability to truly communicate with other than in a board meeting. And I think that we as board members should feel like everybody's suggestions and everybody's comments are being received and distributed to the appropriate staff. And I don't think that that's always the case.
Okay, well,
So we just need to make sure that we cure what we're saying, okay? That's
One-
all I want to do, is
yeah,
make
1
sure
minute,
that we
Mike.
have that.
I just, 1 minute, Mike. I just want to make clear that I think that to simply say there's such and such organization that I'd like to be approached, that, I think that's the element of context should be allowed, not into the minutia of it. Yes, Mike?
Yes, so in response to Manager Valdez's comments about communicating with staff, there is policy out there on this. However, that's why we have set up having a governance manager and a board liaison, Brianna, who is here to receive those communications. And while in the past we have said, please send those communications to Brianna and/or Mike, because you're right, there is a defined path, and that really is helpful. I'm very appreciative of board members that utilize those channels of communication with myself and Brianna, because we are able to disseminate it, we can see it, we can follow up on it. There are a number of members, including yourself, that do reach out to other staff from time to time for, some one-off questions, and I think that's good. But to the extent that we can utilize the established and what are the board agreed to communication channels, there's nothing that we made up, of the CEO and the governance manager or the board liaison, it's one and the same. That is a defined path that's been clearly articulated. Thank you.
Just one follow-up, sir. That is true. There is a defined protocol that we need to follow. But on occasion, we have presentations that are made to us, and we, during our meetings, say, we'll have an offline conversation with you regarding that. And I think those managers, including myself, have had to take advantage of that in order to make sure that we are have the opportunity to exchange where we're coming from, where they're coming from, so that we can have some kind of
That's good.
understanding and, I guess, comprehensive inclusion of our comments. But I don't think that there are many board members at all. I know in the past there might have been a concern about some of them, but I think that for all the most part, I think 99% at least of our board members follow protocols and only reach out to staff when we have been when it has been deemed appropriate for us to do so in order to make sure that our points are made. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Melendez. Any other comments on that issue?
Well,
Yes.
I'd just like to say that I think Brianna has been, at least for me, has been an excellent conduit by which communication is being sent back and forth. And she has facilitated meetings with staff, others, and she's been very timely in sending me notices, even some of the time early in the morning. So I think the protocol we have in place is fine, and it's working well. I think what Manager Valadez is talking about is something that may go beyond just the facilitating of that, but also the meeting to discuss that. And I think that's something we as a board might need to talk about at a later time. But the current system that we have,
Okay.
works well for me anyway.
Thank you. Moving on to the nitty-gritty of the application process, you have in front of you the County Commissioners Court application for medical care. There's the City of Austin standard application. We can certainly move to create our own or just use one of these. Dr. Bell and I discussed, of course, the standard CV and application, and then to a list of questions that we wish to propose that we had discussed. And once again, we're open for another week or two before you end up come up with a list of questions. To give us a chance to write a brief essay about their goals or for this particular committee they wish to sit on. Yes, Manager Melendez.
Thank you. I would only ask to see, or that we be provided a copy of our own Travis County Commissioner Court application to sit on this board, because there's some good information in there that maybe we can include or consider as we put together our thoughts. We already have motions to approve what's being recommended, So, but I think for for future purposes, it would be a good idea for us to look at, because there's such a distinct difference in what Travis County asks us to do to apply to Central Health Board of Managers and what the city of Austin asks, including, and for me, what's very important, and I would want to know this in every application, when we're dealing with a poverty population, I would like to know what the person, the applicant, or even that person who is asking to be reappointed, how they have, what experience they have had, direct hands-on experience with our targeted population. And so at some point in time, because I see that Travis County does, but I don't see that anybody else does. And I'd like to make sure that we have that, because I have brought that up in the past when we've had discussions. And I know that we all are in a complete understanding of what I'm saying and what others have said that they are in agreement with, but not always is that translated into black and white for the public to understand, or prospective candidates to understand, so.
Correct, thank you. So once again, we propose a standard application. We had formulated questions, a questionnaire specifically related to Central Health's questions, as well as the ability to write a brief essay, and then to submit that. So into the nitty-gritty of it, standard application, we have the questions that we had discussed. Once again, submit that, say 7 questions, and then say, answer these for us. The process then was to sort of, if we had more than, I think it was 3 applicants, to have Central Health staff review them. If there's less, the appointments committee review them personally, and then Central Health, if there's more than 3, Central Health staff would then submit the 3 that they feel are best, and then we could then discuss them. But I think in answer to your comment is that opportunity is afforded in the questionnaire that we attach to the standard application. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's an attachment, and it's not included in the actual application.
Correct, it's a different issue.
Well-
This is a standard CV, work history, education, yada, 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 and then our questionnaire, including a brief essay.
And I think what I'm trying to make sure that you understand is that we are at a point in time in 2023, going into 2024, where we have got to, if we're serious about making a change in equity and diversity and inclusion, then, and if we're truly trying to change people's lives for those that have the most needs, the have-nots as opposed to the haves, that's got to be a stated statement or stated question, so that they can, the prospective candidates can respond to that, and so that the public will see that this is not an attachment. This is not a Schedule A, B, or C. This is what we deem important to our organization in order for us to make an appropriate decision. And so it elevates it to more than just an attachment. It needs to be included in the actual application, is what I'm saying. That's all.
Well, Madam Verjaz, in addressing that, once again, you're afforded the opportunity to offer questions that you wish to have answered. Only Dr. Bell and I submitted questions. So once again, you're open to submit questions. I think after that, to have the interview process to go into more detail, to look for the things that we're looking for in an applicant, that was the point of this, okay? Yes, Manager Bell.
I'm going to try to summarize. The reason we gave you the applications that we did was the last discussion we had, there was a question of forming our own application, all right? And batted that back and forth and realized that there's certain standard information that people can give you that you don't need to make them rewrite it all in an application. And so, however, we did hear that there were members who wanted certain questions asked. Yours, one of them, the fact that, what experience have you had in dealing with individuals in our programs or in our programs personally? And so we felt that it's not really an attachment to the application, it's a part of the process. So you would answer those questions in writing for us, send that back, and then we would ask those same questions of you when you came to interview and get maybe some more detail or things that we didn't see in the writings that we wanted to clarify. And so it's not an attachment as if to say it's not important to us. It is a part of a process. It's a part of the application process, and it's given the same weight, if not more, actually, weight than a CV, because in essence, it outlines what we're looking for.
Yes,
Quick response. Again, I think this is to me, it's a priority. It's how I run my life. This is something that I guess I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with it because I think this is more important than that in order to achieve what we're trying to achieve for our population and for ourselves as human beings. But I also believe that if we're looking at making appointments to boards that make policy, then it's important to me whether or not the candidate has ever run a project and developed an initiative that has been successful in closing the gap that affects the quality of life of our targeted population. And that's very specific. And it's specific to what exactly we're trying to accomplish, and that is to develop a criteria or a set of questions that those that we're going to appoint to policy-making decision-makers positions. And I think that they have to be able to answer that. And if they haven't had any experience in that, and if they haven't done this and they haven't done that, and yet they make it through, because they're doctors or they're this and they excel in that, well, that's great. And I think that's perfect. But I still would like to know.
well, Manager Velez.
That's all.
What I would like to, if you would, I don't know if you were on the link of questions, but these very questions were the same questions Dr. Bell and I formulated, exactly addressing that question. What experience do you bring to this? What life experience do you bring? I'd ask you, and I refer you back to the questions that we drafted. You certainly can add on for review, but these issues are specifically addressed in the questionnaire. And as Dr. Bell emphasized, and I do too, it's much more valuable to me, and I think to all of us, to see what the answers to that questions are, not that they go to Harvard. It's much more relevant to us as to what is their mission directed. And I ask you once again to submit any further questions you'd like to, so they can be included on the questionnaire pack.
Thank you. I'll resubmit them and be assured that they're not going to be any different than what I have stated in meetings. Thank you.
Okay, well, please refer to the ones that we have already drafted. I think you'll find many of those questions are very, very similar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on.
One
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Manager Jones.
Just one quick question, and this is more of a process question, and it's for staff more so. Do we have a profile, or can we get a profile, of our representation, of our representatives that we've appointed to the various board and commission by precincts within Travis County and overlap and/or with City of Boston Councilmanic District? I'd be interested to see if our representatives are reflective of what our data seems to say, where our population lives. Demographics. I'd just be interested if we could ask our staff to give us a profile of our representative, as well as the board members as well, to see if we can get a profile of what that looks like.
Yes, Mike.
And you're referring to not only those that are appointed by the Central Health Board, but the entire board, or our council or association, whatever your organization that you're appointing to.
Right, so
Okay.
all of the resources that Central Health has oversight over, the representatives live in these parts of the county and or city, so that we can get sort of a profile of what that looks like. So our appointees to, our appointees to community care, our appointees to integral care, board representation. That way, when we go to the public and say, we are not only, we live in and represent districts that are inclusive of all of the county, and not just parts of it.
Right, so divided by precinct. So, off the top of my head, I think and if you're talking about live, work, those might be two different locations, because you could have somebody that lives west of 35 but works for a nonprofit
Right.
east of 35. So I think capturing both of those points, certainly for our appointees, we could, just by virtue of asking questions, ascertain, what that geographic distribution looks like. But I think we would have to go back to those boards to say, this is something that we requested. And we've already requested, well, like when Sendero and Community Care present and Integral Care, that they give us a list of board members so that you can ascertain what that diversity is like on that board. But we would have to get them to volunteer that information to us, because they're not our appointees, and see, is there some way that we could geographically map this out? Or maybe the the organizations to which you're appointing perhaps already have that information. And so we would need to get with those organizations. And Brianna, if I'm speaking out of turn or technically incorrect on something, please correct me.
You raise a good question. I don't know if we want to, where they live in or work, or where they work. That's a question I think that we might need to ascertain. But on the, on the application you gave us, they have asked for the precinct they live in. I guess this is where they live. And so the question is.
The city or the county precinct?
Integral care. No, this commissioners.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no, just so I have a frame of reference. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm
Let
just trying to
us
see if we can get
huddle
a
on that and see
profile
what we
of
can
where
come
our
up with.
people
Yeah.
that we represent come from, in terms of where their residents are, more so than where they work, because their work has impact all over. But so anyway,
Understood.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I was going to propose that the receive a request from the board for appointment, send out applications, receive applications, have them reviewed by Central Health staff as well as by us, all be done within 8 weeks. Alrighty? If that timeline seems okay to everyone. And then I was going to propose at that point that we interview 2 to 3 interviews, the 2 or 3 final candidates in person on the same day, and that we vote on the same day on who we choose. I think, once again, I'd like to emphasize, we'd like to stick to the set of questions perhaps that we submitted in the application, and not sort of do a gotcha on someone when they're not prepared to answer a question. So I think that we need to have consistency in our questions for everyone. Not throw different things out that people might really not be prepared for at all. Yes, Manager Valadez.
Okay, when they're finalists for an appointment that we're going to make as a Board of Managers, I think that the candidate, I don't believe that it's going to be a gotcha anything. I think that if they're professional, and as we are assuming they are, that they should be prepared to respond to whatever questions any board member has, any manager has. I don't think that we, at that level, I can understand all the prior levels, if that's the way you want to talk about it in terms of process. But at the final level, when you're dealing with a consideration of someone who's going to serve as a board appointee representing Central Health, and what we were created to do under 281, then they need to be prepared to respond. And if you think, or someone thinks, that maybe that is, to ask you, have you ever worked with our targeted population before? You know, I mean, that's,
Well, once again, if you.
But I don't-
If you review the questionnaire.
No,
that
I'm
we-
gonna-
that we
I'm-
sent, Then I think you'll find most of those questions are addressed. And I would
That's-
argue that to go into
that's-
detail in the interview would be much
okay,
more
then,
appropriate.
then let me make clear what I'm saying. I don't believe that we should censure any board member from asking a question that they feel is important for that candidate to respond to in order for them to make the grade or determine whether or not they're competent, I guess, or bring what is needed to the table to serve in the capacity of decision policy-making position for whatever board or committee, commission, we're making that appointment. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't agree with that. Thank you.
I don't, I'll give you an example of gotcha questions, okay? You bring an interviewer, an appointee in, or a candidate for appointment in, and you ask them specifically what our health equity plan outlines, all right? You ask them how much in the budget is allocated for direct care delivery. Those are gotchas, all right? And you shake your head, but it has been asked, all right? And it has been asked to a person who was being appointee. That's the reason you want to stand to a standard set of questions.
Yes, Manager Bell.
I agree that, you know, to ask for that level of detail from a candidate is a little bit nonsensical. But that they understand that we have an equity plan, that we developed an equity plan is important. What the details of that are, they shouldn't have to know that at that point. But we should look at ourselves in the mirror and say, why would we have treated Commissioner Gomez so harshly in asking her questions in such detail that she may not have been presented or expected to, wasn't prepared to respond to during the meeting that we had with her. And I'm gonna say that because it did happen, it's on tape, and it's public. And so if we're gonna take that kind of a,
Chair, we have to follow the, what the items are.
She's not on the agenda.
Yeah.
oh, I'm not on the agenda item?
No.
Oh, okay, I thought I was referring to gotcha questions. Well, that's what you brought up, not me.
You were referring to Commissioner Gomez.
No, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that's an example. That was an
Well-
example. And so with respect to this conversation, this discussion, the issue, I think, is whether or not we believe that gotcha questions are appropriate. I don't think they are. They are not appropriate by not only us asking finalists for an appointment that we're going to consider, but us of any person,
So
okay?
you are in agreement with my statement that we're going to stick to a set of questions?
I'm in agreement that we should have a set of questions through the process. But when it comes to the Board of Managers interview with a prospective candidate, we should not be censured in what we are to ask. We're professionals, we shouldn't be asking that kind of question. And all we would need is for a lawyer or for our chair to say that's not an appropriate question. You make that statement and that's it. End of story.
Thank you. I'm not an attorney. I don't know how they could possibly say that's not an appropriate question. The example that Manager Bell gave was excellent because that's exactly what happened. And it's inappropriate. Someone's wasted their time to come speak with us. I think that if you, once again, review the questions, they're mission directed for Central Health. I think to go into detail them in person allows everyone to have an equal voice, equal standing in front of us. I'm not for censoring anyone, but I'm also not for sending people down rabbit holes that don't reward their time to apply and take the time to come talk to us. And I think that if you look at the questionnaire that we presented, and you can certainly add to that, the broad questions involving Central Health, and they can be directed then to Yeah.
Excuse me, I was going to ask Brianna if she could bring me a copy of
I
that
was gonna
questionnaire,
suggest you do.
please.
If you could CC the questions that
Oh,
Dr.
they're in the packet, okay, I didn't look at it.
But, so anyway, I'm open to suggestions, but I just think that I would not want to, as appointments committee, to be in that situation that we were unfortunately in before.
Right, thank you.
Yes, Manager Jones?
So I just want to make sure that we're not, I mean, are we saying that the questions that we've identified here are the questions that we would, all of the board members would go into the interview process to ask? We would know upfront, these are the questions we're going to ask.
Yes, that's correct.
I think I may be wrong, but I think that maybe what Manager Valdez would say and what I would be concurring is that in an interview process, as always, can you elaborate further on those things? Let me finish. Related to this item or this thing. We're not restricting that, are we not?
No, it's completely, that's exactly the issue. That's the point of the interview is, can you extrapolate on that? Can you go into more detail on that one issue? Not, this other thing. And we're completely in agreement on that. Because that's exactly the point of the interview. They've been allowed 5 sentences to write their view of homelessness. Well, let's really have them in person and go in depth on that, not detail
Okay.
specifically. That was the point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Um,
Yes, Manager Valadez.
Thank you. All of these are basically what your administrative or managerial skills are. The only one that would look at being what I'm referring to, I think, is question number 1, which is the most important question on there. And what I'm saying is that we as board members should have, like I said, and Shannon, thank you for explaining it a little bit better, a lot better than apparently I did before we take off down that rabbit hole, is yes, explain to me in what way your experiences have improve the quality of life, or what projects do you have that have been successful in that these are our goals, this is our mission, and we're looking for someone who can make policy decisions that will impact that. So, yes,
So-
that's all I'm referring to. I say it's just,
And
Yeah,
once
and
again,
that-
everyone,
I agree.
you can add
I-
more
I
questions,
thank you.
but it's that I drafted those on my vacation. So if we can agree to a consensus on that and stick to that, I really would appreciate that as appointments committee.
it's just, okay, if we're gonna have 8, I guess we're not gonna have 9 people ask questions. You won't have 9 people ask questions.
The appointments committee. This is
For
not-
the finalists?
We will present to the board. The board appointments committee will present our decision to the board of managers. We can discuss it in the board of managers with our logic, and our decision-making is who we voted to appoint.
Okay, I was under the impression that we would look at the finalists, but the finalists go to the entire board.
No, I don't.
Then you're taking away the individual board manager's responsibility to make a decision that impacts Central Health.
If we denied people to come,
Mike,
if we denied people to come to committee meetings, then you are correct. We don't. Anyone can come to any committee meeting and listen to any issues that they want. Can they participate in the questioning? No. All right? They're not a member of the committee.
That's not the correct example.
but.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The correct example is, are we as individual board members being allowed to participate in a decision-making process for Central Health that we were appointed to do? That's part of our responsibilities and our obligation. And yet not participate in the selection process of someone who's going to represent Central Health and these other boards and commissions. I think that that's taking something away. I think that's not right. I think that we
We can let
each,
him answer.
Yeah, if you look at any issues in what happens in a Senate confirmation, there's a committee that reviews and then proposes to the Senate how they should vote for someone. And once again, Manager Velez, the point of this is to simplify this process. Anyone is welcome to come, sit through the meetings, and have this issue addressed. But the issue isn't to take a vote as the appointments committee as to who we wish to propose to the Board of Managers. The Board of Managers is going to say no and vote no. That's not, they say, no, we don't like this person, they're whatever. And then we go begin the process again. No one is, we have to, this is our proposal. Manager Jones, anyone?
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So we're saying that the appointment committee will do the interview process and then make recommendations to the Board of Managers. These are the recommendations for the positions that we're talking about. That's the process we're talking about.
That's correct.
And what are you saying, Manager Valdez,
saying
about that?
that
You don't agree with?
Microphone.
That we would be the judge and jury. We would be making the process, the recommendation to the Board of Managers. The Board of Managers would not have the benefit of having heard the candidates speak, the finalists speak, or ask them any questions. We would be taking that away from them, that decision away from them, by being the only four people that whoever sits on this committee would be the ones that are making the final decision, is what I'm understanding. Tell me that that's not true.
That's not what I'm understanding them to say.
You are correct.
So what do you, explain it to me better?
We will interview, the appointments committee will interview someone, interview people. We'll take a vote with understanding that any board member can come to meetings and then take that proposal, that person, to the Board of Managers for an up or down vote.
Without benefit of speaking to the individuals. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
If
So-
you attended the committee,
Well, no, that's if the board member came to attend a committee.
Yes, I mean, Manager Valdez, I mean, I'm on the medical committee. I mean, we make decisions. The idea is to streamline the process.
Well, I don't agree with you,
Okay?
because I sat on this board when the attitude of Central Health was, if you didn't attend a committee meeting, you don't get the information. It's up to you to figure out what happened during the committee meeting. That was the attitude when I was first appointed to this board. And I do not want to see that attitude, like I said, when we're talking about cultures, that I don't want to see that raise its ugly head again, because that takes away each individual board members, each individual city and county appointee, takes away their ability to participate fully
But
in a
then-
decision-making process. So when you do not allow them to ask the recommendation, we're making the recommendation, whoever is on this committee will make a recommendation to the board. The
Okay.
board will not have the ability, if they did not attend the committee meeting, they will not have the ability to know what was actually said in that process, and they will be forced to make a decision based on something that they may or may not have participated in.
Well, let me
That's
pro-
all I'm saying.
Thank you. Well, let me propose meeting you perhaps halfway, that they can come and ask questions, as long as the questions are the questions that we've agreed upon. Would that satisfy you? They have to come to a meeting, Manager Valadez. I mean, to say I want to be part of government but not show up for meetings is not being part of government. And so I think that I'd meet you halfway, that someone who's not part of the committee could certainly be welcome to not only just come, but to also ask questions. Would you be satisfied with that?
I will say that I'm not in agreement with any policy or practice that will take away each individual board member's ability to hear from the candidates, the finalists at least, for a board, a commission representative of
And-
Central Health, without having the ability to ask themselves, the candidates, what the responses are going to be.
And
I
what I-
think that that's
and-
not
and-
right. I
and
think
what I-
that
and-
goes against the grain of what we are about,
Manager
okay?
Valdez, and what I am proposing is just that they be allowed to come. They won't vote, but they would be certainly open to asking questions. Would you be okay with that?
Well, then what's the problem with just having that interview process occur during a full Board of Managers meeting? Would you be amenable to that?
No, it would not. I think it results in the same problems we had before.
The problems we had
We-
before?
we accept recommendations from committees all the time. Members can come to the committee meetings or not come to the committee meetings. That's their prerogative. You even thanked us one time on a video on the fact that we opened up committee meetings so that everybody I mean, you've said that.
That's because I lived at Central
Well,
Health
whatever,
during a time
whatever
when you
your
couldn't.
reason, you said it. All right? You said it.
That's right.
And I feel this is the same thing. We're making a recommendation. You as a board member, you can vote no. If you didn't come to the meeting and you didn't talk to the candidate, that's your problem, but you can vote no. Nobody's taken your vote away. Nobody's taken any information from you away. If you wanted to hear the information, it's taped, and you can come to the meeting.
If I may, Manager Velez, it'd be similar if they're having a Senate hearing and they have to go present in front of the entire U.S. Senate. That's not how it's done. You take suggestions and proposals from committees to then take into the full vote under the impression and the suggestion of a committee which had a more in-depth process with the candidate. And that's what I'm proposing. I would be open to suggesting that people be allowed to come, if they wish to come on their own time during the committee meeting, to ask questions within the context of the questions we're affording them.
One final comment.
Yes.
I did not agree with the decision that was recommended by the Travis County Deputy Attorney for our board members to not be told that our executive sessions were no longer going to be taped. And so if I was absent for a meeting, I couldn't hear that tape. If you are telling me that we are going to have a taped committee meeting where the prospective candidates are going to be interviewed, and that's going to be the one and only time that they're going to be interviewed, and that the board members who do not sit on this committee are going to be telling you, you can only ask these questions, and the other board members would not have the ability to question or follow up, then I think that that is not right. I think that that is not right. And I will not agree to limiting the power of any board member to make a decision and,
Chair.
participate fully.
Just based on the items that we have in front of us, I mean, I know it's going back to questions and some other topics and stuff,
Yes.
but we have to kind of focus on just what we had.
Okay.
And in the future meetings, we can discuss more broadly if you'd like.
Thank you. All right.
I just want to say thank you for allowing me to end my comments, but I think that you all get my feel for what I believe.
Thank you. The final thing was drafting a letter from the Appointments Committee for selected and not selected candidates, for thanking them for applying and being accepted, and second, for applying, and a standard letter was sent to Brianna. She can forward it if it's not in the package. And the final thing was small recognition in the media of the person appointed and the role of the board and its partnership with Central Health. Any comments? Any more questions, comments, or shall we move on?
Are we on item 4?
Yeah, we're still on items 2 and 3. Oops.
Well, we have motions here that have been given to us to approve or not approve, so.
Right, can I have a motion on agenda item 2 from?
Clarification,
Yes,
criteria also means the questions.
under
To
what?
approve the criteria under item, motion number 2, says recommend that the board approve the criteria and timeline. So I'm asking the definition of criteria in this case. Does that mean inclusion of the questions and the process that has been outlined, including that the appointments committee will be the final decision maker of proposed and recommended candidates to the board of managers?
I think it's outlined in the.
3C has the questions. in
I'm
it.
sorry?
Item 3C,
So two does not have it?
No, it's in
not
2.
specifically.
It's
So
in
where's-
agenda item 2 that she's reading.
Where's 3C?
It's the second it's the second motion.
third item.
It says number 3. I thought you said 3C.
It is.
3,
If you look at you're looking at the motions. If you look at the item, the agenda item, not
Oh.
the motion.
I'm looking at the
So-
motion.
yes.
I'm not looking at this. I was looking at this.
So the second agenda item, we went into detail on the timeline and the process. And we settled on that for 8 weeks. And, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. All right, can I have a motion for agenda item 2? Yes, Manager Bell?
I move that the committee recommend that the board approve the criteria and timelines to be used by the appointments committee to solicit, evaluate, I'm sorry?
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. I move that the committee recommend that the board approve the criteria and timelines to be used by the appointments committee to solicit, evaluate, and recommend candidates for appointment to outside boards and committees, allowing for modifications by the committee to address unique circumstances and as presented on this item.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second for discussion, for the discussion point.
Thank you, Manager Jones. Do I have a second? Yes.
Okay, that last caveat, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Allowing for modification by the committee to address unique circumstances and as presented on this item. Can you help me just make sure I'm clear on understanding?
Well, I didn't write that. Maybe Manager Bell can extrapolate.
The way I understand it is that we're passing a process that may or may not need to be changed based on other circumstances that may come in. For instance, the questions might be different because we're looking for a different type of candidate. So you may deliberate and decide that the questions listed today are not appropriate for the type of candidate that we're looking for, all right? So we'll make adjustments.
Okay,
based
so it
on
builds
that.
in that flexibility. to be-
Exactly.
okay.
Building in the flexibility to allow for when a particular item that we discussed in the process needs to be adjusted.
Okay, all right, then that helps me understand.
Thank you, Manager Bell. Moving on-
Again,
Yes.
clear in discussion. Hasib or Trilisha, if you all, with the approval of the chair of this committee, can clarify to me whether or not that approval of the process, or I'm sorry, the criteria and the timelines is different from the number 3, which includes the A through whatever, G or H, has anything to do with restricting the full participation in a full board meeting of vetting a final candidate in item 2 and in item 3 by the board.
The chair always has full discretion in the Board of Managers meeting to decide how much they want to go into a meeting or not. That's always up to the chair, so to speak.
No, I understand that. That's not what I asked. So I guess I'll ask you, Chair. And you will be speaking for whoever is the chair in the future. So for right now, I want to make sure that you are saying that neither motion item 2 or 3, whenever we get to it, includes the potential limitation of the full board membership to have the ability to vet and ask questions of recommended candidates for the board or appointment that is being put forth before them on the agenda item.
Yeah, that's not what the process says. People, we discussed, if we wish, we can have people come interview on the board, people on the board can come interview the patient, the person, ask questions. I would like to propose a question, though, that perhaps this question should be brought in front of the entire board, as to which the entire board wishes to interview.
The finalists?
No. If approach the Central Health Board to say, do you wish to be involved in the process beyond voting, or do you wish to simply take our recommendation? That's a democratic process, and if the whole board votes, we simply wish to accept the recommendation from the Appointments Committee, I'd be fine with that.
And Chair, all these motions are recommendations to the board. Even these two recommendations are
Yes.
going to go to the board for full approval.
Okay,
So that could be discussed at the board when these.
I would
eventually
like
come-
that discussed at the board.
Okay.
Any input? I think that would settle the question.
Well, I think you're right. And it would also speak to a lot of other issues that I have raised to here today. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, any other further questions? Yeah, can I have a vote for agenda item 2, please? Those saying yay? All in favor? Aye. Okay,
All opposed?
all opposed?
All abstained?
All abstaining, thank you.
Show manager.
Manager Valdez?
As opposed.
Is opposed. Agenda item 3. Oh, yes, do you have manager?
No,
Oh, okay,
motion
I'm sorry.
carries.
Okay, motion carries, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Agenda item 3, I'd like to ask for a motion on that agenda item 3. Manager Bell?
I move that the committee recommend that the board approve the steps to be followed by the Appointments Committee in evaluating candidates for appointments, allowing for modifications by the committee to address unique circumstances and as presented on this item.
All who, second? Manager Jones? All in favor?
Discussion.
Discussion? Any discussion at this point? No? Okay.
I just,
Yes. Manager.
my question goes to, relevant to what we just did on the obvious motions. Based upon the based upon the attorney's recommendation, ultimately, our committee is to recommend to the board what process.
That's right.
So we've
That's right.
done the processing aspect of it. So if we have, excuse me, we have questions and concerns about what we put forth, we can also at the board meeting
Right.
raise them, and the board can come back and say,
We don't want to do
We
that.
don't want to do that.
So
That's right.
That's basically what we're doing here today.
That's right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for further clarification, Manager Jones, that's why I made the comment about how the board votes ultimately when we have our board meeting is going to be an answer that would address other issues that I brought up here today. Thank you.
Where were we? Do I have a second? Any more
He
discussion?
seconded,
He seconded?
Manager Jones
No,
seconded.
Did you second it?
So
Oh,
discussion is
Any
ended.
discussion's over? Any other discussion?
in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Any
opposed?
opposed? Manager Valadez is noted as opposed.
Any
Any abstaining? None.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item 4, confirm the next regular ad hoc committee appointments meeting date, time, and location. Managers who do not currently have a scheduled Central Health ad hoc appointments committee meeting. When a need for a meeting arises, we will work with committee members and other managers to choose a date and time that works with everyone's schedule. At this time, I'm ready to accept the motion for adjournment.
I move adjournment.
Second. Thank you. Carries. Any discussion?
All in favor?
All in favor? Yeah, okay, what
Oh, you
question?
want to discuss adjournment?
No, mine relates to the next meeting. My only question with the next meeting, is there any reason we do them 10:30 in the morning versus
Talk to the chair.
having them in the afternoons on a date that we have other meetings ongoing, I guess is what.
I'm open to change that. My reason for this Monday was because I'm off on Mondays and my schedule's otherwise, so I'm happy to segue to the other day we have meetings, that's fine. I don't expect that we'd have a lot of these
Lot of them,
meetings.
yeah.
Once we're established, these would be rare occurrences, and I'd be fine for scheduling it during those times.
Okay then.
Okay.
All right, that's fine, thanks.
May I ask for clarification? Would you be amenable to a different time, but on Monday? I don't know if the 10:30 is, in the morning is the issue, or the Monday.
I think
everybody's-
is alluding to having everything compressed on the same day.
Yeah.
Which I'm not opposed to.
Okay.
It's Monday's simply convenient for me, that's all.
Thank you.
And I have the gavel, so. As such,
All in favor?
all in favor?
Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed?
We are adjourned.
Adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for managing that.
Thank you, members.
I did it in 2 minutes.